This is the kind of thing that I would be tempted to score as bad faith.
I'm white, and I've got everything I need. No one clutches their purses when they're in a room alone with me. And I can drive for any neighborhood I please at any hour, and the police don't do a thing. So if I see a penny on the ground, I leave it alone and fucking flip it. I'm a straight white male in America. I've got everything I need. I'm a guy getting paid more than a girl with a degree. And I can walk down the streets after dark, no one wants to rape me. And I can get a girl pregnant and just as easily flee. Just like my straight white male dad did to me. So if I see a penny on the ground, I leave it alone and fucking flip it. I'm a straight white male in America. I've got all the luck I need. I've got a pile of broken mirrors and I'm walking under ladders and I'm spilling tons of salt, but to me that doesn't matter, cause my skin and my gender and my orientation are the best things to have if you live in this nation. I recommend it highly. I see a penny on the ground, I leave it alone and fucking flip it. I'm a straight white male in America. I've got all the luck I need. Shit's gonna work out for me, cause I'm a straight white male in America. I've got all the luck I need.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Intellectual Dollar Tree. We do the show live every Wednesday, 7 p.m. Pacific, right here on Twitch. That's twitch.tv/Echoplex Media. We're also going out to some other places, Twitter, Facebook, whatever. But head on over to Twitch. That's where the community hangs out, and it's the only place we'll even think about paying attention to what you say in chat. I'm Producer Dave, and you can find me on Grindr.
And I'm HK Parent. You can find me on Twitter at HK Parent, and you can find me in the Twitch chat as Sylphweed.
Fuck yeah. So, I don't know. Is there anything we need to say before we get started with this content here? Anything going on? Oh, check out our new show.
Oh yeah, we do a show every week called How the Tech Are You? We're on YouTube and we're on all your podcatchers, and we're also on Odyssey with it.
Yeah, so. The Odyssey, it'll go up tomorrow. I just didn't get time to do it today. It's fun. We're still working out the kinks, trying to nail down the format. Nothing live for it yet, but maybe as time goes on, we'll find ways to do things live associated with the topics of that show, but maybe not. Maybe we'll just keep it as a podcast, keep it mellow.
Yeah, speaking about the topics of that show, we cover tech news that a lot of other places don't cover. Things like software development news, open source and Linux news, and some consumer electronics news, like robotics and crypto news. Although kind of everybody covers crypto news.
Yeah, but Matt does it with a certain degree of disdain, so that's good.
Yep.
And we don't cover Elon Musk on that, but we're going to end up talking a little bit about him today. This is going to be interesting because there's someone to root for. If you were a regular viewer of this show, you'll remember a few weeks back I interviewed Aaron Rabinowitz from Embrace the Void podcast, and he went on the David Fuller show to try to talk sense to David Fuller and some guy named Jim Rutt about free speech versus moderation. So it'll be interesting to have someone to root for in this. I can't stand David Fuller of Rebel Wisdom. I think he's a horrible grifter who charges people $500 for Zoom calls about things like sense making and hyperventilating. But that didn't come up in this, I don't think. But real quick, sense making, when they talk about it, the best I can tell is it's the idea that you and I can work out the answer to something almost to the exclusion of empiricism. That's what they mean when they say sense making. That maybe you can figure it out by doing sense making instead of listening to relevant experts. And this stuff is very attractive to people who like the intellectual dark web. because they all think they can figure everything out by themselves because they're fucking delusional people.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that if all evidence didn't point to the contrary.
Right. I can't figure out I could figure out how to fix my toilet, but it would be because of the work of relevant experts previously, right? You and me couldn't just sense make about it and then fix the toilet. You know what I'm saying? We would definitely be relying.
If you sense make hard enough, you'll end up pooping outside.
That's right, because your toilet. then you'll have to introduce yourself to your neighbors, even the ones who don't already know you. So this isn't really about sense making, but I just for a little bit of just for the background here, that Aaron on this does not believe sense making in that way, and so it's going to be interesting to see him try to talk to these two people. I don't know who Jim Rutt is, but he's going to be taking the other side. And for a change, I believe all three of them are on the call at the same time instead of what David Fuller usually does, which is stitch together a bunch of stuff to try to make it appear maybe they're all on the call at the same time when they really weren't. But I think I haven't watched it. As a general rule, I don't watch this stuff before I view it. But I do think they're all on this call at the same time in this one.
Okay, was that him that did the video with like three people on a couch and then it would keep cutting away to him talking about it, just the two people talking about it afterward?
I don't know if that was him or not. That was the one about UFOs and shit, right?
Yeah.
No, that wasn't him.
Oh, okay.
But that was also confusing editing.
Yeah.
This guy does some version of that
style.
This guy does some version of that, but I don't think he does it here. I mean, it might just, I did actually hit up Aaron beforehand. Aaron, I was like, hey, we're going to cover this actually this week. I hope you don't mind. And he's like, I don't mind. So Aaron's going to probably come out looking pretty good anyway. Aaron's a good dude, and I like him. And he's going to make sense. So here we go. This is Rebel Wisdom, Elon Musk, Twitter, free speech versus moderation, Jim Rutt, Aaron Rubinowitz, and David Fuller.
So yeah, the conversation we're having now is based on the very high profile potential takeover of Twitter by Elon Musk, and the sense that a lot of us had. So I'm joined by Jim and Aaron, who I'll introduce in a second. And we've been having a sort of a conversation about what the current debate is kind of missing, which seems to be kind of splitting along the sort of typical political lines and the sort of free speech censorship. And there's a sort of deeper dimension of kind of the questions of moderation, the questions of creating healthy online communities and why they go wrong, that I know both of my guests have been.
This is like a minor quibble, but I think they recorded this like from like a Zoom call or something. Look at how shitty his video is. Like, and he's the host. He's like the interviewer.
Yeah, I think you're right.
It's like really soft,
like he's not recording himself separately.
Right. It's like soft and washed out, right?
Yeah.
That's weird. Also, you don't look soft and washed out on my feed, but instead of sense making, I listen to relevant experts on how to bring someone onto the fucking show.
I could wipe some grease on my webcam if you want.
No, that's all right. We don't need that kind of authenticity around here, sir.
I've been thinking about for a lot of time and also have real world experience in. Jim Rutt will be familiar to a lot of our viewers. Jim has been involved in online communities for a long time, former head of the Santa Fe Institute, and has just published an article for Quillette called Musk and Moderation.
Oh, great. Great. This guy's great. He published an article for Quillette. Fucking, I already don't like Jim Rutt. People say when I do that, though, there's poisoning the well. And I'm like, well, that well is full of poison, actually. So, I mean,
yeah. Poisoning the well, like it doesn't necessarily mean that the other side's argument is invalid, but it can still be a pretty good indicator. If there's some person making an argument and they've never made a good argument to you before, and they've made tons of bad arguments, there comes a point where you can just start to ignore them.
Right. And Quillette is like a race pseudoscience publication primarily.
Yeah.
They also employed Andy No. So it's this thing that we come up against all the time here, actually. And it's not you, it's me arguing with people on Twitter where people get mad at me for like starting to make character assessments. Like we've been following all these people for a long fucking time, and eventually you're going to start to make some assessments of people's character. It's just how it's going to go. You do it in your day-to-day life, in your interpersonal relationships, and there's no reason you shouldn't be doing it in the public sphere. And I just think that after everything Killette has done, if you decide where you're going to publish as Killette, I am going to assume that your character ain't so great.
Welcome, Jim. What are you offering with the article, and what do you want to talk about in this conversation?
Hey, well, thanks for having me on, David. Always enjoyed chatting. So the article is fairly long and hits on a lot of pieces, but I'm going to focus in this summary on the upfront part, and I think is the most important and new addition I hoped to add to the dialogue.
Oh, we brought back the displays.
Yeah, but they're not on the roof.
Oh.
I liked that they were on the roof before.
There's only room for 2 displays on that roof, actually.
You need smaller displays.
Or a bigger roof.
Soon as the Musk story started to build and the probability increased, I saw a tremendous amount of puerile and anodyne argument on both sides that were absolutist. Moderation, no; moderation, yes, etc. And as a person who literally helped invent the field, when I went to work for The Source, which was the world's first consumer online service in 1980, and actually designed and ran some of the earliest online communities and many online communities since. That's absurd. You cannot have an online community without moderation. And there's, but to just to deal with the idea of moderation in the whole is too broad. So I came up with a tripart model where I talk about the distinctions between decorum moderation, content moderation, and viewpoint moderation. And I offered some definitions and some specific examples and why decorum moderation is essential, why content moderation needs to be narrowly and precisely circumscribed, but is necessary as well. And that viewpoint moderation, which is what the payload of the message is essentially, we should be very reticent to engage in.
So wait, what he's saying is you need to be nice to him while he puts out content that says the black people are stupid. Because the tone or whatever, you should always moderate the tone, or what did he say at the beginning? The decorum, right? So people need to be polite as he puts out content, and the content, you might moderate the content, but then the viewpoint, if he's like, his viewpoint is racism, you should be very reticent to moderate that.
I would argue that is an impolite viewpoint.
Right. I would go back to the decorum, right? I would say, well, it's some of these things that you think are just your viewpoint, when you're on the receiving end of the message, it seems quite rude.
Like there are a lot of crossover between these 3 things. And like I'll agree, like content moderation you absolutely have to have. You just can't have like it makes you liable if you're allowing everything on your site. But the other 2, like there's huge overlap between them, and where do you draw the line? Like he draws the line at one place, I draw the line in another place, you draw the line in another place. Everyone has their own line where they're like, this shouldn't be on the site, this should be on the site. So it's like everyone does that.
He's almost making the argument that I think is stupid that a lot of the IDW people make, where they're like, well, the tone is more important than the substance. Like Sam Harris sort of makes that argument where he's like, well, these people are awfully nice to me. It's like, it doesn't matter what kind of bullshit is coming out of their mouth, right? And it's so, yeah, you're right. The decorum and the payload, it's just when you decide which is which, you're making a content moderation decision. Like,
yeah.
And I don't think he's going to argue for like people saying the N-word or whatever, but he might. He looks I mean, looks like he might. He published on Killette after all.
Further, it's my belief, I don't know the man, so I could be wrong, but it's my belief that what Elon actually cares about is viewpoint moderation, that all points of view, the substance, is available in the public square to be debated, to be upregulated, to be downregulated based on the quality of the ideas, how it resonates with people, how the ideas are built upon by other people, all the ways that that collectively humans process the new and the old, and come to decide how to build our civilization forward in its next step, because our civilization is always unfolding into a future. And I also have a very specific idea, which I call the green shoots hypothesis, why it's so essential not to stifle the ideas at the fringe, which is that just as biology is based on mutation, and talk to any evolutionary theorist, and I talked to one yesterday, and he'll tell you 99.9% of mutations are deleterious. They're bad for the offspring. However, without mutations, we'd still be single.
That's not true.
All the progress in biology came from that 1 in 1,000.
The vast majority of mutations are not like they don't affect anything.
Right. Like if somebody has 6 toes or whatever, like it really, like they can still walk. That doesn't make their feet not work. It doesn't destroy.
Well, I mean, like the vast majority of mutations have no effect at all.
Right, but what I'm saying, I just used an example, HK, that one that like it has no effect. I mean, sure, you got 6 toes, right? But it's like benign, basically. It's not good. It's not bad. It's just some people have a little extra webbing in their fingers, and that's not good, not bad. It's just the way it is. But yeah, you're right.
Like there's a mutation that's completely invisible.
Right. Most of it's benign, not good, not bad. You don't even notice it, or even if you do, it doesn't do anything bad to you or good for you.
Yeah, and the good and bad, like it kind of depends on how you define good and bad. Like evolution kind of has a particular definition of it. If it helps you procreate, it's good. If it hinders you from procreating, it's bad. Right?
I don't want to get. This guy is not an evolutionary biologist, so it's sort of what he says about it is like irrelevant. But yeah, you're right. Like most of them are just benign. They don't have any effect at all.
Like by that definition, most of them don't help or hinder you. So yeah.
So he's full of shit.
Yep. Was actually good and then got passed on by a natural selection. I would suggest the same is true with respect to social unfolding, is that, Sturgeon's law, famous law from the 60s by a science fiction writer, said 90% of everything is shit. He probably underestimated, at least on the internet. But that's okay. Even with 99% is shit. 1% are the ideas that will save us. And if we arbitrarily squelch anything that is contrary to the status quo narrative, that upsets conventional wisdom, etc., our social progress will stop, and due to the second law of thermodynamics, which is that everything runs down over time, we'll start to move backwards. And that's
what the fuck is this guy talking about? Either. This is fucking pseudo intellectual. He said shit. 99% of what he's saying is shit.
Everything runs down. That's what he said. That's not what that means.
Right.
Entropy increases over time. That doesn't mean things run down.
Well, and the other thing is we don't even know what he means by running down. You know what I'm saying?
I assume he does not mean that the temperature within a closed system gradually reaches equilibrium.
Jesus Christ. This guy's full of shit, though. This guy's like it's like scientism what he's doing here. He's like just sort of grabbing sciencey sounding things that he thinks apply to like what happens on a website. And like then universalizing it to like society as if it's affecting all of society. The thing about Twitter, the average person walking down the street might have a Twitter account, but they ain't on there like I am. They only have a couple 100 million users.
But fucking everyone is on Facebook for some reason.
But like, so not only is what this guy's saying, like he's just like pulling out some shit from a science fiction book and fucking like poorly discussing the fucking laws of thermodynamics, fucking pulling some shit out of evolutionary biology he probably himself doesn't understand either. None of this is the realm of like a sociologist or a cultural anthropologist. You can't just grab a few different things that you heard about different science stuff, throw it together and say that you're a Twitter genius. Like I mean, you can, but you end up looking like a dumb fuck.
Yeah, either he grossly misunderstands science, which is the answer, or he grossly misunderstands Twitter, or both. But the answer for sure is at least he grossly misunderstands science.
I believe with Elon that point of view censorship or moderation should be done with extreme reluctance. I mean, will I say never? No, never say never. But I would say that with extreme reluctance. So now let me switch back to the part that I believe Elon does not yet get, and subsequent tweets he has made since my essay was written, raise my eyebrow a little bit that maybe Elon doesn't get this and he needs to read my my article. God damn it.
I mean, he is from South Africa. He's probably, and he grew up during apartheid, and I started calling him Apartheid Clyde. He probably does read Killat, honestly. Elon seems like a Killat reader. Seems like the target audience to me.
Which is that decorum moderation is absolutely indispensable to the successful operation of online communities. And again, I literally have been doing this for 41 years across every platform before the internet, in the early days of the internet, and up through the rise of the internet. What
is his social network?
Yeah, he moderated some forums in the 80s, is what he's saying. If you listen,
it seems like he's an expert on social media moderation, so he should have a social media platform, right?
He's probably just mad about this.
The focus on ridicule.
Decorum moderation literally means don't dunk on people, right?
I think so. Or I think it means if you dunk on people, you have to be subtle about it.
Right. It has to be
you
a quip.
have to dunk on them in ways that they don't understand that they're being dunked on.
Right. The smart people call it a quip. They're like, oh, you had a quip. Everything's just supposed to be like, it's like pocket watch. It's like a pocket watch kind of discussion, right? It's like two people with a pocket watch discussing like their horrible views on race and sexuality or something. They're like, oh, but they're wearing a suit. Look at their decorum. They're so polite to one another.
And that guy's got a monocle.
Moderation.
I think that's actually Mr. Peanut.
The conversation goes to shit.
I want to kind of park the elephant in the room that we'll come back to in a second, which is this kind of the nature of kind of moderation versus censorship, because it's such a hot topic online. And I think we need to kind of grasp that before we move on. But I'd like to start by introducing Aaron. Welcome, Aaron.
Hey, how you doing? Thanks for having me on.
So, Aaron, thank you for joining us. You're a philosopher. You're the host of the Embrace the Void podcast. And you've written a lot about free speech and content moderation in the past. And you've also kind of put your money where your mouth is with a fascinating article, which I'd highly recommend people to read. I'll put it in the show notes, about Monster Island, which was a kind of unmoderated place that you set up in the aftermath of the 2016 election. I'd love to hear a little bit about that and just maybe your framing before we go into the conversation as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to say thanks for having me on, because as we will find out, I love robust disagreement. And I think I have some robust disagreements with y'all, but I also think I have, it sounds like, some valuable agreements in terms of the need for content moderation, and also the recognition that content moderation is extremely difficult. I want to say, Jim, thank you for your service. Anyone who spent time in moderation trenches, to me is someone worth having a conversation with. And I read your article, and I sort of like the overall tone, though I'm concerned. I think I have some issues with, specifically, I think, trying to separate out content and point of view. And maybe it's a debate about the examples that you use, but we can definitely get into that. To give folks a little bit about my background, like you said, I'm a philosopher. I specifically am a moral philosopher who's interested in moral education, primarily issues around luck, both moral luck and epistemic luck. And by extension, I'm interested in skepticism about things like conspiracy theories and the way that people can get sucked into kind of conspiracism spirals. And then my background in terms of like the pseudo applied version of all of this is back during the Trump election. I was still arguing a lot on Facebook. I hadn't gotten on Twitter very much. And I had been put in touch with a couple of very conservative individuals who also wanted to argue. And we were doing a lot of like debating on our walls on Twitter. And I was getting messages from friends like, can you desperately please put this somewhere else? So we created Monster Island, which was a closed private Facebook group for people who wanted to argue with no content moderation rules, essentially. So the goal was, simultaneously to create a space where we could do this far away from normies and not ruin their lives. But also I, was interested in testing an idea that I think was dominant at that time and continues to be fairly dominant in a lot of online ecosystems, which is a kind of free speech absolutism, this idea that you really could live without content moderation. And I was curious to see how that would work.
One thing I will, if Aaron wanted to do something in a place with no content moderation, you can't really do it on Facebook because the algorithm still sees your private group and will still like pull down posts if they have certain like keywords in them.
Yeah, you can't really trust Facebook.
Well,
you'd have to build your own.
Right. You'd have to do it on another website. But still, his conclusion here, I can already kind of tell what it is because I fucking probably agree with this guy like 90-something% of the time. His conclusion is going to be that it was a shit show and people started threatening each other and shit. I bet that's what.
Yeah,
that's probably where this went.
We kind of already have that. Like 4chan is, for the most part, unmoderated, and like 4chan is a shit show.
Right. People don't want to go there.
Yeah.
Were actually seriously disagreeing with each other. So we created a space where there were no official rules about content. There was only norms that would be enforced by individuals. What we tried to see as long as we could go without making rules, which was not very long. Immediately, we had to start making rules because people were doxing each other. People were, we had to make a rule preventing people from posting pictures of each other's loved ones having sex with dictators, usual internet kind of things. What was really interesting about that part is not particularly surprising, I don't think, but you have to do the science.
He said they had to stop people from basically going onto other people's Facebook walls, finding a picture of their wife and then photoshopping their wife getting fucked by Stalin or something.
Okay.
But what was interesting was
that's against Facebook's TOS.
Making the rules, which is there's always this kind of Red Queen escalation between people trying to moderate and people trying to, for whatever reasons, test the bounds of those moderations, usually for antisocial reasons, usually for their own entertainment. And so the content got really, never got really good to begin with, unfortunately, and stayed generally pretty bad throughout. And eventually I gave up on it. And then a year or two later, we shut the group down because one of the members, a person who I had argued with many times, who had talked many times about how it was good that people were getting out into the streets and fighting over race, was involved in the Kenosha shooting. He's cited in the reports as being the tactical advisor for Kyle Rittenhouse's group. Obviously, there was a lot of backtracking by them after things, but that was a weird connection. That was sort of a stark reminder that the internet is real life, and what people say on the internet tracks into their behavior in real life. So the big takeaway for me that I talked about in the article is, a pushback on this free speech mantra that sunlight is the best disinfectant, or that we can really just get it all out in the open and solve these problems. In my opinion, there's two things wrong with the sunlight is the best disinfectant view. If you want to take that kind of metaphor, the first is that we conflate something being promoted widely with it being exposed to sunlight, which is not true. Many things get spread very widely without them facing much sunlight because sunlight moves slower than the spread. And we all know this to be the case. And it's why People who do work in misinformation will emphasize that prevention is worth way more than any attempts at putting the problem back in the bottle. The other being that if you want to use the biological evolution model, Jim, which I'm not totally opposed to using, I think it's important to understand that certain ideas are weaponized anthrax, and that like exposing them to mutations is not a good idea. They should be kept in a lab and like heavily guarded and like not spread in these kind of ways. And my main concern with your article was, for example, you put QAnon in the point of view box rather than the content box. And I think that either doesn't understand what QAnon is or suggests a major problem with those two boxes. And this, I think, is indicative of a larger problem with...
Oh, they don't know what QAnon is. You have to be like down the rabbit hole to really know what the fuck's going on in that community. So yeah, this guy, just like when Brett Weinstein, remember when Brett Weinstein said QAnon and then couldn't call it a conspiracy theory? He called it an argument. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's like a prime example of like this shit just leaks out into the real world. And there were just so many people, and I hope Aaron like brings this up. There were just so many people who were like arrested, involved in actual child trafficking because they thought they were saving some kid from somebody. There were people that like tried to like get into orphanages and shit because they thought the tunnel children were there. Like, it was bonkers. It wasn't like everywhere, but some really bonkers shit happened.
It was causing real harm.
Right. Not just on the internet. And it's not just a viewpoint.
Heterodox communities, online communities, YouTube, lots of different places where, in a genuine desire to seek truth and avoid shunning error, given a prior history of too much shunning of error, I think folks lean too much towards seeking truth, and it leaves them vulnerable to really dangerous misinformation and conspiracies, especially from right-wing sources, that, they let in because they're trying to be open to that one idea that might be really valuable. So that's where I'm at. And hopefully this can all come across in good faith, because I do appreciate the work that y'all are doing.
Yeah. So there's plenty that I think Jim and Aaron, you can kind of spark off each other in a minute. But I just want to grapple with that elephant in the room now, which is, I found since being on YouTube, like the free speech absolutism is close to a religion on YouTube, especially in the comments thread. And I think it's worth addressing that sort of, why is any moderation needed? The idea of censorship is so taboo. I mean, I can understand why, and the arguments tend to be sort of steel manning. The cure for any bad speech is good speech, is more speech. The censorship is a slippery slope. And who would you trust with the power of deciding what's accepted and what isn't? And all of those are very valid concerns, really important concerns. And I think we've seen what goes wrong when people without any kind of accountability make those decisions. So it's a very strong position. But one thing that strikes me is, like, we're in an environment of information war. We're on the verge of AI created infinite amounts of bullshit. Like, just those two facts alone should, I think, give us pause to think that things can become self-moderating. I don't think they will be self-moderating. I think those perspectives are understandable, but for me, it's an ideological position that is at best unproven in the world, that good speech will drown out bad speech. And as two people who've got a lot of experience of seeing how this plays out online, I'd be interested if each of you in turn could like steelman the position of why moderation of any kind is so taboo, and also why you think that if you think that's a naive or an incomplete perspective, why you think it's an incomplete perspective.
Sure, I'll start. I think you actually did a pretty good job. Basically comes down to, who makes the standards, how is it adjudicated, and why should X's opinion triumph over Y's opinion? And I think, those are all good arguments with respect to viewpoint. moderation, actually. And again, to my green shoots hypothesis that we can't say in advance which ideas are good ones. Example, I don't think I used it in the paper, but I used it in a long discussion on Facebook yesterday, which is even, Curtis Yarvin's ideas about monarchism. I think they're bad ideas, but he presents them in a good faith fashion. And
like, who's out there censoring monarchs? Who's out there going, everything's fine on Twitter until the people who believed in monarchy showed up. Shut the fuck up. Like, this all exists like in like the way this Jim guy is talking about this stuff. It's like it all exists in the abstract and it doesn't have any impact on anybody's life. And what Aaron was talking about was how these things do have impacts on people's lives. Like, yeah, somebody could come on my show and talk about why they think like a benevolent monarch would be a good thing, and they probably would never offend me. You know what I'm saying? I'd never think, oh, this is going to hurt somebody. This is going to cause real harm to somebody, because nobody wants to go back to monarchy. That's a very fringe position, but it's also harmless. Like, who the fuck's going to install a king? Like,
it's harmless to the extent that it will never happen.
Or not never, but it's like, I wouldn't be worried that platforming somebody who believes in monarchy would lead to somebody being harmed.
Yeah, but you could have said the same for QAnon in the beginning.
It happened after Pizzagate. I already knew what that shit was. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, it was just the rebranding of Pizzagate. But some people might have not known that, and probably would have held that position. And it would have been somewhat reasonable at the beginning. But a few months in, you're like, oh, what do you mean the mole children? You're like, whoa, that's weird.
Yeah. I think content moderation has to grow with society and the way we speak to each other. And like grow with ideas. Right. As QAnon becomes more and more dangerous, it should be more and more taboo for a platform to allow that content on.
Well, it's back now and just in a whole different form.
Yeah,
that shit around Disney and your teacher being a groomer and shit. You think that shit comes to us the way it looks now without QAnon before it? I don't think so.
Yeah. And QAnon wasn't the first. That's been going on since like the 90s or 80s.
70s.
Maybe before that.
In the 70s, they wanted to say that gay people shouldn't be teachers. There was a big deal. It was a central point of the movie about Harvey Milk.
Should I or anybody else say that Curtis Yarvin's proposal that we should replace democracy with monarchism not circulate? Maybe he's right. I don't think that we should assume that first past the post elections every 4 years democracy is the end point of social system evolution. And so I'm very, very reticent to suppress the ideas themselves. But again, as I said in the introduction, the key error the absolutists make is to not make the distinction between decorum, particularly, and viewpoint and content, where decorum breaks down our ability to have reasoned discussion. And very important.
Yeah, this guy doesn't want to be made fun of.
Yeah, like you can have a reasonable discussion and call each other assholes. Like that's still possible.
Yeah, I don't buy this shit at all. I'm like a troll, so of course I don't buy it. But like, this would like get rid of comedy. Like, a lot of comedy is making fun of people and their ideas, and that's not very high-minded. That's not pocket watch decorum, as we were talking about earlier. Like, come on, man. If by decorum he means you're not threatening someone, well, that's fine, because that's illegal to credibly threaten somebody. To make any credible threat of violence is illegal.
I wonder if maybe he's talking about like would he allow South Park on his content platforms?
I don't allow it on my TV because it hasn't been funny in about 4 years, but
yeah.
But yeah, this is this tone over substance shit, where I think the substance is more important than the tone. If you're saying good things and you're swearing, you're like, I fucking love you, man. Well, that's good. Maybe some people don't like the word fuck, but that's a good thing for me to say to
fuck
you.
Them.
It's a good thing for me to say to you. Whereas if I like politely suggest to you that I'm going to track you down and fucking blow your head off while wearing my monocle, well, well, that was polite.
Yeah. He's making it sound like he would only allow one of those on, and it's not the same one that we would allow on.
Although, again, it's credible threats of violence are illegal, so platforms have to take that stuff down. So,
yeah. Do you think under his weird boxes that would fall under content moderation?
it might be the content. That might be content. Yeah, I don't know. I just, the three things that he's saying, I think you're right. They overlap so much that they're almost useless.
Yeah, his boxes are very ill-defined.
And well, yeah,
maybe I have to read his article to understand him. But
no.
In terms of the standard definition of those words, those boxes are very ill-defined.
It introduces what has become known in the freer speech space as the heckler's veto, because of the nature of the bandwidth, especially online, where it's one thing after another. If you have a heckler in bad faith, attacking people, just putting in crap, the conversation.
But then who decides what's crap? Like, what the fuck?
Yeah. Also, like, he wants to stop hecklers.
And online, you can't really.
I would disagree with him here.
You can't heckle there could be a heckler's veto in a physical space, right? But not online. People can't stop you from typing or recording your videos by heckling you. They're not.
Well, they can. Like, you just run your own site and then you can ban all the hecklers.
Yeah. But I mean, they can't. But the heckler can't stop you because they're not in the room with you. If there were hecklers in the room with me here, yeah, they could probably shut the show down because you wouldn't hear me over them.
Yeah.
Sure. But that's in like 3D space, not on your screen.
Down all the people who are interesting and smart go somewhere else. And so the heckler has the ability to.
But who decides who the interesting and smart people are, dude?
Yeah, what if it's an interesting and smart heckler?
This guy's an idiot. Listen,
like, does he think that interesting and smart people can't heckle? Or
decorum.
don't heckle?
He thinks decorum is very important.
Speakers,
I feel like he's saying the only way he'll find you interesting and smart is if you are extremely polite.
Speech and decorum has to be the tool we use against that, and put a little bit more meat on the bones of decorum. Examples could be no personal attacks. In one of my online systems, we have that rule, and we have a death penalty version of it. Any personal attack that uses an obscene word targeted to another user, you will be expelled with no appeal instantly. Right?
But that's the opposite of free speech.
It is. It's the opposite of free speech, and also it doesn't really prevent anything bad. Like, basically, that's not a bad thing. Calling someone a fucking idiot is not a bad thing.
That was my fucking same example I was going to use. So if you were on this guy's thing in the 80s and you're like, dude, you're a fucking idiot, and then you like tell them why. Well, you're gone no matter, even if what you would put in afterwards was like correct and like properly punctuated or whatever the fuck else this guy wants you to do on the internet.
Yeah, I'm sure that those kind of rules attract the kind of people that he likes to interact with. And I'm not saying like on his own spaces he shouldn't have that. If he wants those kind of people on his own spaces, sure. But for something that's meant to be for everyone, like Twitter, having those kind of rules would just push out the people I would want to hang out with.
Right. These platforms, I don't pity the people who own these things or whatever. They're rich and they didn't really do a whole lot to make all that fucking money, especially Zuckerberg, right? You think that guy works anymore? I don't think so. But they are in kind of a weird position because if they just kick off everybody who calls everybody else names, then nobody's going to be there.
Yep.
So like, I don't know.
It'll be like him and 6 people.
And the other thing is, it'll be like, people will be like hip hip cheerio, and then insert thing about how black people are inferior, and everybody will be like, oh, you're following the rules, you know?
Yeah.
We start reading from the bell curve, and it's just like, they're like, oh, this guy's reading from a fucking book. How smart. What a smart, interesting person quoting from a book. It's like the Turner Diaries and shit.
Like it sounds like his rules of moderation would create a niche platform, like the kind of niche platform that I'm sure he would love.
You know,
and again, that's not bad.
You know who else would
it's just not for everyone.
You know who else would really like it?
Who?
I'm dealing with people on a daily basis who are just happy to smear me dishonestly.
You know, that's who would like it.
And I think another person that would like it is
the focus on ridicule.
That guy?
Yep, him too. But also, I
this
don't
guy?
know how to deal with a woman.
I'm defenseless against that kind of female insanity.
There you go.
It'd be that guy too. Yeah. It's like an IDW fucking social network or something that he wants to do, where like people politely discuss whether or not it's okay to behead trans people. You know, it's like, dude, no. Like, yo, this is stupid. This is like a
yeah, this is how to create a really shitty social network. This guy's teaching you how to create the shittiest social network.
And other ones, are.
Can I?
Yeah, hop in there.
Actually, I don't ask you about this, Jim, because I think this is one issue where I think there's a challenge, which is this: how do you talk about people? What things are you allowed to say about people and not just ideas? And I don't think it's as clear cut. Like I think we can agree, not cursing at people. Great. Fine. But like, am I allowed to say that a person's view is racist? Am I allowed to say that I think their view is extremely dangerous and harmful? Am I allowed to say that I think that their view shouldn't be part of the debate within our community? Related to this, and I think this gets to the viewpoint concern that I have. You bring up Yarvin there as another example. I think it would be harmful, right, to talk about Yarvin, like one of Yarvin's ideas, and not talk about his larger project and the implications of that project gains prominence, and the way that project has influenced people like James Lindsay and stuff, that it has had a substantial impact on a lot of regressive elements. I think folks who are lean towards the kind of free speech absolutist position, because they're nervous about ad hominem attacks, they're also nervous about talking about ideas as part of a larger body of work. And they're nervous sometimes, I've found, and this I think I will say specifically is true of both of y'all, that like y'all have in the past platformed individuals who have very specifically harmful views and mostly talk to them about other stuff, which may not necessarily be directly connected to those views, but that can be problematic if your viewers get the impression from that conversation that you think that this person is a good source of information, and then they go and look at their other content and they come across anti-vaxxer content or something like that is a problem that is harder to address if we're not able to talk about how, how one person's views on this thing are connected to their views on something else, or are connected in other ways through them as an individual. So, I think we have to be careful at every stage of the kinds of content that you're talking about, the kinds of moderation that you're talking about, not to think that there's an easy answer. I think there's hard questions about decorum. And I think at the end of the day, there's really only one other category, which is content, and content has to be understood broadly there. And it can include to what seems like to some people things like guilt by association, or, over assuming or pattern matching or something like that.
Yeah, let me speak to a directly experience we had on The Well. The Well is probably the oldest surviving, well.com, for those of you who are interested. And I used to run it on
on my Spectrum computer. I remember I got a 14.4 modem, 300 baud. We hooked up with the little thing where the phone attaches. It was all rich white people, and everything was great.
In full disclosure,
I was using the Gopher protocol. It was
it's been running since
World Wide Web,
and it consists of a bunch of what we'll call conferences. You can think of them as fora, typically on a specific topic. And we have two about politics and current events. One explicitly allows personal attacks, and the other explicitly forbids them. And so to the example you get about,
but then again, who decides when it's a personal attack? When I've decided that what you're saying is racist. Is it a personal attack for me to say, no, what you just said is racist, and I think you're a racist?
I don't know. What if the person views being a racist as a compliment?
Right, then how do you moderate that?
Yeah, what if you say, you, sir, are a racist, and they go, oh, thank you.
Right, then
you noticed. I was wearing it so I was just exuding it from my pores. Thank you for noticing.
Right. Then you get kicked off and the racist is hella mad because they're like, but I liked that person.
Hey, he was complimenting me. That's like, oh, wait, you took that as a compliment? Is that who I'm attracting to this site?
You're a racist, right? In the conference called Politics is the one that does not allow person X. You cannot say a person is a racist unless you have evidence of racist actual behavior by that person. However,
but then who the fuck is like deciding what the evidence?
Define that.
What do you just have like a series? Do you have like a series of like fucking mini? Do you have like also a bunch of rooms that are like courtrooms in your fucking? Like, what do you do?
The judicial system.
Right. Like, what are you talking about? Oh my God.
Argument is racist? Yeah.
Yes.
Sorry.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. You can say the idea that you're putting forth is racist. And though some of the people, the well is full of very sharp, almost pettifogging, lawyeristic, rabbinical type argumentation, which is actually a lot of fun. They'll say, well, there's
rabbinical. Is he just calling them Jews? I don't know. We'll let it go.
I would say, for instance, there's four kinds of racism. There is
sure. I'm all for detail as a philosopher.
Yeah.
Sure.
And so if someone says racism, so what do you mean by racism? So there'll be some pressure on that argument. But you can't say a person is a racist unless you have proof of their racist action, but you can critique the idea. So again, this is jurisprudence. It's built up.
You can also critique clusters, like you can critique Charles Murray's entire project as racist, not just one particular argument.
I want to step in a little bit here.
Yeah, sorry.
Because Aaron, I think your argument, because you addressed it to me and Jim directly, and I think it's a valid argument that I would like to address because it's talking about sort of platforming, ethics, and it feels like we've talked about me coming on your podcast, and I'd love to and maybe talk about this in more detail. But I feel like the platforming ethics conversation is a slightly different one than the Twitter argument and Elon Musk and where we're at the moment. So I'd maybe like to kind of pull it back to that. And
but have you ever gone from a 300 baud modem to a 14.4 K modem, David Fuller? Do you know what that would be like on the well?
Jim's proposal for kind of moderating and make it kind of more relevant to the Twitter example and what Elon might be kind of wrestling with. Because the big question or the big thought that's coming through here is, despite the fact he's kind of potentially investing like 40 however many billion in buying Twitter, it seems that he hasn't really thought through some of these issues. But it seems to me like from some of his tweets, there's a real naivety in terms of, and these are questions that, because all of us have in some ways kind of...
Did you hear him stop short of saying what Elon's even naive about? This is what I don't like about this guy. One of the things I don't like about David Fuller is he'll like say, oh, I think he's naive about, and then he'll stop because he's such a fucking clout chaser that he probably wants Elon to come on his show one day and wouldn't want to be fucking saying what he thinks Elon might be naive about. one of the things I don't like about this guy is he'll stop short of like really leveling any kind of criticism of anybody and their character and their behavior on his show. His Twitter and his blog are a little different. He'll directly criticize people, but the audience on his Twitter and his blog are like a fucking 20th of what's on his YouTube channel on like one of his more popular videos. So it's like, I can't stand that because he fucking stopped himself right there from actually saying something.
Being in charge of communities or in charge of platforms where this has come up as a real issue. I think a lot of people who comment on this, the comments I see in the comments thread, are coming from a position of someone who's never probably had to wrestle with this and realize like, oh, actually, maybe there are rules like that. Some of these arguments, some of these statements do have a real impact on people. And I have a certain responsibility as someone who is in charge of this space to do something about this. And I think this maybe is the journey that Elon may be going through. But yeah, this sort of sense of a little bit of a naivety that you see in his tweets of sort of shooting from the hip, like someone willing to drop like 40 something billion of his own money without really seeming to think this through in any meaningful way. I think that would be really interesting to sort of dial into what he may be letting himself in for.
Except that's not really the issue here, because you're just trying to read the Elon Musk tea leaves if that's the conversation you want to have, right? Like, I don't know what the fuck is going through that guy's mind. I saw somebody who had a pretty compelling argument that he's mad that Grimes left him for a trans woman, and this is just like, you know how when other people like go through their midlife crisis, they buy a Corvette, he's buying Twitter. I don't know, is that what's going on?
Yeah, maybe. Also, it's debatable whether that money is actually his.
Right, it's Tesla.
You know, when you make it on the backs of, you know, labor that's treated unfairly, is that money actually yours, or did you just steal it?
Right, and it's loans against Twitter stock, and as soon as he did this, the Twitter stock fucking went down quite a bit because the people investing, or not Twitter stock, I'm sorry, Tesla stock, because like the rational people who are like investing in Tesla are like, oh, this seems stupid.
Like I heard he sold a lot of his Tesla stock.
Yeah.
In order to do this.
So the fanboys don't care, right? They're going to keep their Tesla stock. But like the market seemed to care that this happened. Tesla went down, I don't know, like $100 a share or something. And like, so, but the problem I have here is that David Fuller's asking his guests to basically try to read Elon Musk's mind remotely. And like,
yeah,
that's impossible. But at least he went to Aaron first, and maybe Aaron will be like, I don't know what's going through that guy's head.
How this applies to Twitter in particular, because we don't really have the same platform dynamics or hosting dilemmas that maybe where you were going with that, Aaron.
Sure. Yeah, I'm fine to set that aside for the moment. Let me speak again to the like optimism, idealism side of things, because I know that I'm going to come off as, you know, pro moderation and sort of critical in various ways. But I want you to understand, I teach John Stuart Mill. You know, some of my best friends are John Stuart Mill. I, you know, love the soaring rhetoric of On Liberty and the idea that like, you know, the best way to defeat a good idea or bad ideas is a confrontation with a good idea, right? Like I was raised liberal in all these kinds of ways, and it's been a hard road for me to recognize the limitations of an approach where, you know, I'm a scrapper. I love arguing. I could argue all day, and it could be very easy for me to adopt the perspective that like arguing in this way is the highest form of engagement, and everyone who doesn't do it is just a coward or something. But I don't think that's true. And I do think there are really genuine concerns about, you know, how we do moderation, how we do discourse. And some of those concerns can go too far in the other direction. I don't know if we'll talk about civility porn, but like there can be a sort of a downside to what Jim was describing in terms of spaces where there's like such an emphasis on civility that you're not, it like makes it very hard to even be critical of folks. But I think,
that's one of the things I talked to Aaron about when I interviewed him. We talked about that a lot, is like you don't have to like that, like sometimes you actually are able to get, like, especially in interpersonal relationships. You ever had an argument with somebody where at the end of the argument, because they fucking finally like were mad enough to actually tell you what you were doing that was pissing them off, that you were like, I didn't even know that's how I was pissing this person off. And so because it got heated and the filters dropped, people actually start communicating. Yeah. And then, like, even though you're mad in the moment, like, you wake up the next day and you kind of go back over and you're like, I didn't know I was doing that. Like, I wish you would have told me. And they're like, oh, I didn't want the confrontation. And then it turns out that the confrontation and the kind of rudeness of the confrontation is what enabled the communication to happen, because that's just how we are. Like,
yeah. Certainly in interpersonal relationships, confrontation can be a good thing.
Right. And in the public discourse, I think, like, people get to sometimes the root of their disagreement when they're getting shitty with each other. Like,
yeah.
I think you're right. Let's focus in on the hard questions of the details of content moderation and talk about Jim's article some. So as I mentioned, I was concerned because in reading through it, I wasn't sure, Jim, if it was just a not seeing content as harmful as I do, or I want to hear more about why you said that QAnon is equivalent to things like a religious belief structure, and like why it should be allowed to just sort of run rampant in the same way that we would allow Catholic organizations to run rampant in social media. Because I think those are categorically different things. But I'm curious to hear more about your perspective on that.
Yeah, I thought about that quite carefully, right? As I said in the essay, I think QAnon is a very bad idea and exceedingly unlikely to be putting out true statements. But I would say the same exact thing about Christianity, astrology, and Marxist-Leninism. I am strongly opposed to all three, and I believe they do actual harm in the world.
But only one of those things is telling you that your political opponents are drinking baby blood.
Yep. Only one of them actively encourages you to view your opponents as like subhuman.
Right. Just by its very nature, there are going to be Christians, Catholics, astrology people, even Marxist Leninists who hold those beliefs about their opponents in the marketplace of ideas. But the QAnon, that's what QAnon is.
Yeah, that's the doctrine of QAnon.
Right. And it's also not like any of those things in that it's a cult. It's a fucking decentralized online cult.
Yeah. And I think, isn't QAnon based on like the Christian idea of demons?
To some extent, yeah. The problem is it's like a big tent thing. It like can bring you in from any sort of like place, right?
Okay.
Yeah. There's that in there. It's also like there's elements of the idea of like blood libel in it, which is bad. Like real bad. Yeah, this is not oh my God, like this guy's like fundamental misunderstanding of how these things play out in the real world he's just detached from the real world in his analysis of this. It's so weird.
And there are sects of Christianity that have the same effect and the same kind of beliefs as QAnon. The same belief in like anyone who opposes me or my group of people is a literal demon.
Right.
And those, I think, should be moderated just like QAnon.
Absolutely. And like missing from this analysis is a couple things. Like the fucking satanic panic is missing from this analysis, because we saw what happened to people back then. People went to jail for fucking satanic abuse of people they never even fucking laid a finger on.
Yep.
And then also missing from this analysis is things like Scientology, where QAnon is like essentially like the satanic panic with Scientology's marketing department. They don't have the boat though. No boat. No boat.
And have done tremendous.
They'd be unstoppable with a boat,
particularly Christianity and Marxist-Leninism. But for the reasons, the green shoots hypothesis that we can't say for sure what ideas we should allow into circulation or not, and nor should we have any confidence in giving that power to a central authority. I am willing to tolerate Catholicism, which I was raised in, so I know the insides of that sucker, astrology, which causes people to make bad decisions all the time, Marxist-Leninism, which killed 100 million people in the 20th century, and QAnon, which seems
But
like,
wait, didn't capitalism kill 100 million people in the 20th century too? Like, doesn't every fucking ideology that gained any power in the 20th century just have blood dripping all over its fucking hands?
Yes.
Yeah, like it's not unique to Marxist-Leninism, right? Marxism-Leninism. It's like no matter what you like, if you like the two major ideologies that were at war essentially through most of the 20th century were communism and capitalism. I know it's oversimplified, but y'all both killed just a ton of fucking people. Y'all killed a ton of fucking people. And then the worst elements of both got put together in the Third Reich, and then they killed a ton of people too. But oh my god, because they fucking decided to be racist about it, like incredibly racist about it. Like, come on, man. Like,
well, we were racist about capitalism too, but we weren't that racist.
Right. Well, one could argue slavery was, not.
Yeah, but that was before.
Okay, that's fine. Yeah, all right.
So we're absolved of that. We're not absolved of that.
Yeah, no matter who you were, if you had the reins of power, you have blood on your fucking hands. It's just like one of the functions of having the reins of like global power, and like it's fucked up. But it's just fucking humans, man. I mean, fucking just like every other animal, we fucking kill each other.
ridiculous nonsense. And I would say they do belong in the same bucket as memeplexes. They fit in the category of memeplexes. Or what
they're definitely all memeplexes, and I'm happy to talk about that. I think it's
I don't know what a memeplex is
of them that I think we need to focus on.
And so I would say, who's to judge which one is the most malignant? I would put Marxist-Leninism at the top. That's the worst of the four, but that's just my opinion, right?
Okay, so let me present you a case for why I think that's incorrect. And you brought up the who judges thing. We talked about it earlier as well. I did a Skeptics UK mag, the same people who I did the Monster Island article for. I, of course, then had to do an article called Who Decides in response to the endless question of who decides. And I sort of explained that I think that can be is a genuine concern that we have to address, but is often raised in arguments strategically at various points as a kind of thought terminating cliche in the defense of free speech absolutism. So, if we take the who decides problem as, always something we have to solve before we start doing any of this, I worry that we never manage to do any content moderation. And since we all agree that we need content moderation, there's going to have to be moderators of some sort, and we can hash out the system. Once we agree there needs to be kind of moderation. I want to talk about the green shoots thing for a second, because I also worry that this is a version of like the Galileo gambit, or that Sturgeon's law similarly is a kind of version of the Galileo's gambit, where if you really take seriously the idea that you can't know which is the 1 in a million good idea, you actually have to just let in everything, which includes, Holocaust denial or something, because you never know, maybe Holocaust denial actually is the good idea.
Well, let me interject there. I would allow Holocaust denial.
Yes, sir. I would have guessed that you would have allowed Holocaust denial on your website. You didn't have to tell anybody that, dude, actually, based on what you've said already. As long as it was a polite Holocaust denial.
Yeah, if you were rude about it, immediate and permanent ban, no appeal.
It's a little dicey, so you actually need a pocket watch and a monocle to talk about it if you're going to be part of this guy's forum, but
yeah, I think that's a mistake.
I think it's obviously bullshit. But
not to everybody. It's not obvious to everybody is the problem.
That's okay. I mean,
obvious is a subjective quality, and many people experience it as plausible is the problem.
Under my reticence to touch viewpoint, I would allow in polite Ku Kluxers.
Whoa, come on, dude.
I mean, saying what?
Right. I guess if they were just in there sharing a recipe, you'd have no idea they were a Ku Kluxer.
Yeah. What does he mean? Does he mean that he would allow them to advocate for burning black people at the stake? Because no.
Are they allowed to recruit on your website politely?
Yeah. What is he's saying he would allow them in as a person? Fine. Twitter does that.
Right. They have no idea what you believe when you join.
Yeah, you don't have to swear that you're not a Ku Klux Klan member when you sign up for Twitter.
Oh my God. Yikes, dude. I mean, I hate to be like, I don't know, man. Like this is ridiculous. This is a person, by the way, that David Fuller takes seriously on these issues, everyone. So again, my reasons for criticizing David Fuller are his character and his judgment of other people's character more broadly. And he thinks this is some serious mind talking about content moderation. But again, yeah, what are the Ku Kluxers doing? Like he also has like a shorthand for them, which is odd.
If they're on there advocating for like terrorism, is he okay with that? Because that's in general what the KKK advocates for is illegal. It is itself like illegal content.
Whoa, dude, this is wild. This guy's like, it's totally okay if like if the Klan is trying to organize on my website as long as they don't call anybody a fuckface.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
There is such a thing. I expect they couldn't resist flinging around
I
racial
think that just
slurs.
gets you Monster Island is the problem. Like that's,
Nope,
that's
I don't
just
think
the road
so.
back to Monster Island.
I don't think
so.
so.
Let me talk about the QAnon part of it as well, because
Okay.
I want to make an argument for why I think QAnon is uniquely different.
Let's do it.
Because I'm an atheist. I agree with you that like a lot of religions are harmful. I am not a Marxist-Leninist, though I agree with you that it has in various places caused various kinds of harm. To me, one key litmus test here is, can you be a devoted member of a particular idea or memeplex and live a good, fairly flourishing life, essentially, right? Basically, this is a question: is how malignant is your memeplex there? I think you can be a happy, flourishing Catholic who's fairly Catholic. I think you can be a happy, flourishing Marxist-Leninist who's, I think so. Obviously, you can agree to disagree here, but like, I don't think you can be a happy, flourishing, fully devoted QAnoner. I think it's a kind of malignant memeplex, a kind of conspiracism that pulls in so many things around it that once you're in that space, if you can't get back out of it, you're going to be miserable and scared and have a really bad life. And I think we see that play out over and over again for people in those communities. So, I think we can distinguish between particularly dangerous, harmful ideas and say that those, whether they're big enough to be viewed as a point of view rather than just an idea, that they need to be moderated. And I do think that like some of the stuff in the heterodox worldview makes it harder to acknowledge that that's something we need to do. There's a kind of atomistic approach to excising very small parts of the memeplex while letting the larger thing kind of run rampant.
Yeah, I think I would just say I have to relatively categorically disagree. One about the facts and the secondly about the standard. I actually know some QAnoners, and most of them are jolly happy folks. Right?
Oh, yes, of course you do.
I'm kind of like growing tulips or something, reading The Last Drop, trying to interpret it, and chatting with their friends.
Reading The Last Drop. This this guy only knows about what QAnon is basically from like the way normies talk about it. Because there hasn't been a last drop since like the end of the year 2000. There is no last drop. I mean, there is. There's one last drop. It's from late in the year 2000.
2000 or 2020?
Or 2020. I'm sorry. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, this guy, they're not reading the last drop. Oh, this guy, of course this guy knows some QAnoners. If you know some QAnoners and you're not trying to fucking help them and deprogram them, you're like fucking, you're not doing a good thing, man.
Yeah, like I'm in this subreddit called QAnon Casualties, where people talk about the ramifications, the fallout of their family members and their loved ones becoming what they describe as QAnon casualties. Basically, they started to believe in QAnon and they just became like it just became unable that their relationship with them could continue.
Yeah, it's similar to Scientology in how it forces people to like abandon their previous relationships and their previous interests in favor of the cult.
Yeah. And I think it fulfills a lot of the I forget who it was. There was a guy who has like a list of properties that
You're talking about the bite
properties. Model. Yeah, the bite model. It fulfills a lot of those properties, and I feel like the more properties it fulfills, the more it should be moderated out of a platform, because it's a fucking cult at that point.
Right.
And cults aren't good, no matter what they are. Like, you could have a cult about, here's my cult where we get together and plant tomatoes and tend to our garden, but we've given up like all of our worldly possessions and we've ostracized ourselves from our families to grow tomatoes. It's like, that's still bad. Even though you're just growing tomatoes, like all of those other properties of the cult make it bad.
So this is why, like, when I started thinking that QAnon was going to be a real problem, the first people I went to ask about it were Tony Ortega and John Atack. They're both longtime researchers of Scientology. John Atack's a former Scientologist. Tony Ortega is not. But those are the first two people I went to talk about this, to be like, hey, I want to make sure that, what I'm talking about and the things I'm saying about this are, reasonable. And if they kind of line up with what you think about how cults form, even though it's online and doesn't have a central leader. And I had a pretty interesting conversation with John Atack about that in our second interview. And because I knew what it was, I was like, this is a fucking cult. But I wanted to make sure that I wasn't just calling it a cult, like reflexively, because I am sort of personally inclined to compare things to Scientology because I know so much about it. And, I got reinforcements on some of what I was saying and a little bit of pushback in certain areas on some of the other stuff I was saying. And I like brought that in because those are people who have devoted their lives to studying a particular cult. And it's a very popular one that everybody knows about. And yeah, it's got so many of the same properties of a cult that it's almost pointless to point out the distinctions and the differences. And these things are harmful. These things separate people from their families. On that board you're talking about too, every once in a while, you'll get somebody who snapped out of it and goes on there and tells people that like they still have strained relationships with their family members, even though they're snapped out of it because their family members are worried they're going to go down another rabbit hole, or their family, or they said things to their family members. There's some shit you can't take back. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yep.
And so, yeah, this guy just doesn't understand what QAnon is. He doesn't understand how information spreads on the modern internet. And he also has like a friendly shorthand for, he's like the Ku Kluxers. Like they're just like people who like, I think there are probably Ku Kluxers on the board he was talking about that he ran.
And I feel like a lot of people, they dismiss cult members as, being like, oh, you're a cult member because you're weak-minded or whatever. And like, I could always recognize a cult and I would never join one. But like, it does happen to people who are rational. Like, rational people can fall for a cult.
Well,
anyone can fall for a cult. If all the factors align just right, anyone can fall for a cult.
Right. And the other, like one of the things, like, I don't believe in the idea of a rational person anymore. I believe in the idea of like general intelligence, that at least that can be measured, right? So I don't think there's such thing as a rational person or a skeptic. I think of these things as tools in our tool belts, or skepticism, rationality, or whatever. They're tools we pull out, hopefully when we need them, right? Hopefully when we need them. So
I like that view.
And so, well, I think it's almost obvious. Like, I don't, you know what I mean?
Yeah, because no one is rational 100% of the time.
Right. So, I think it's almost obvious. And I think the people who are like, oh, I'm a rational person, I think they mean to say that they're usually rational and they try to think things through. Anyway, let's see what Ku Klux or Grandpa here has to fucking continue to say about QAnon. Jesus Christ.
Bizarro online services. So I think factually, the hypothesis that their lives are miserable is not true.
Have you ever known cult members?
I've known some ex-cult members, but I've never known a person when they were actively caught in a cult.
People who are actively caught in these memeplexes often think that they're in a really good place. Like, it's similar to being on a manic kick. Well, okay. So I think we have to debate then. Is there something like the difference between, is everyone flourishing if they think they're flourishing, or are some people wrong? And like, if someone's doing heroin all day long, but they're really happy about it, like, would we say they're living a life of flourishing? Okay.
Not my business. If they want to do that,
it's your business. I think that we should be able to make.
But that's not the question. The question wasn't, is it your business? The question is that person actually fine just because they're high and happy?
Yeah. And the obvious answer is no.
Oh my God. Yeah, I would have lost my nerve with this guy already, right? Like I would have got mad.
I shouldn't just say it's obvious. I should actually explain why it's obvious, because it's, at least in terms of heroin, it's harmful to your health, harmful to your relationships. It alters your brain in a way that that causes you to need it more. And it does that in the same way that a cult does. Well, not the exact same way, but in so much as a cult also does that. A cult literally alters the way you think and makes you need the cult more.
Right. And similar to something like a drug is the love bombing thing, right? Where you feel good because everybody's like, when you first get there, everybody's super hype on you being there. That's how they keep you when you first get there. It's not the 1-to-1, but it's close enough that we can sort of draw a similarity to it. And this is, I would have already lost my shit with Jim Rutt, by the way. I would have already lost my nerve. And I don't know how long this is, because you could tell this is heavily edited. I would have lost my nerve already, honestly. Like, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. This guy is terminally not online, doesn't understand, like he's, I don't know, like the way information can spread quickly online is just, sometimes you got to put the brakes on it, and sometimes you're going to have false positives and put the brakes on things you shouldn't have put the brakes on. And if you're going to fucking Monday morning quarterback that shit, then go ahead, I guess. But it's not like that is a argument against moderation. And ooh, yeah, you should drink every time he says memeplex. The chat's having a little bit of fun. But and when
what
they're
does
saying
memeplex mean? I've never heard that word.
I was about to like talk about that. I think that I like maybe the doctrine of what we would call an online cult would be like the memeplex, sort of. Like it would be the sort of accepted ideas within online communities. I'm guessing would be like the memeplex.
Okay.
I don't know if that's exactly what it is, but it seems like in context, that's what it would mean. Just the accepted ideas inside an online community. Yeah, it's like the now space. We have a memeplex here. Like it's, well, no, it's true. We say, like, if people are new here, especially late at night, we're talking about things they don't know what the fuck we're talking about most of the time.
That's true. The Echoplex memeplex. I like it.
Yeah. And I mean, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. People have in-group, out-group when, kids make up, kids and adults, but a lot of kids will make up language so that they can speak freely about things in front of their parents without their parents knowing what they're talking about. Like when people would just refer to like weed as like CDs or t-shirts or whatever, that's a meme. It's like a memeplex, right? It's a ways to talk about drugs without really talking about them. So your parents or any authority figure around doesn't know. Yeah, that's a great example of a memeplex. Anybody who, when you were a kid and you started smoking pot, if you did that, you had words that you would use. And so I think that, yeah, our memeplex here would be...
Well, not nowadays. Nowadays you can just say, right, well, I'm going to go smoke some weed. But back before it was legal.
Right, but that's when you're kids, maybe not so much, right? Because your parents are... But like, yeah, talking about the door here, talking about the now space here, even just the idea of galaxy brain, not everybody knows what that is. Although that's a part of, we took that from a bigger memeplex. The people who like to make fun of people who think they're hella smart. And that's a whole other, like, yeah, it's the accepted, just sort of like, almost like a sub language within a community would be like a memeplex.
Okay.
And every community has it, and it's usually not dangerous. It's actually fun. Like baseball fans have a way they talk to each other,
Yeah.
But fuck baseball fans. They should be removed from the internet entirely.
Not making value.
We can make a new internet just for baseball. I'm fine with that.
So again, not a good distinction. I can make the value judgment. I think, my friend Bill sitting around doing fentanyl all day, watching porn and jerking off once a week when he can get a hard on. If that's what makes him happy, fine. But I will tell him if he asks me, I think you're on the wrong
It's
track.
very hard to argue that about fentanyl. That will kill you, like, pretty immediately. You just do it wrong once and you're dead.
And the other thing is people who do it generally get it not knowing that it's in their opiate drugs. People. So this guy, add to the list of things this guy doesn't understand: fentanyl.
Yeah, like it's very hard to dose fentanyl correctly, especially if you're getting it from an illegal source. And like you dose it wrong once and you just die.
My children not to go down that road.
So you do think he's objectively wrong? You just don't
I think he's
involved.
objectively wrong. It's not my job.
So that's
I'm willing to tell him that I think he's objectively wrong, but I'm not
content
willing.
Moderation is doing that at scale, right? It's being willing to say, the KKK folks are objectively wrong, and while they can have their own space, they can't have our space. Right?
Let me add another distinction here, which is hugely important. Which I did not get into in the article because we just ran out of time. There's another dimension, which I call domains, which is in groups like Facebook groups, subreddits, private online communities that are put together for a purpose, or I call more generally a domain. It's perfectly reasonable for the moderators there to be very specific about ruling things inbound and out of bounds. For instance, the Harley Davidson subreddit will vehemently whack you if you talk about Japanese motorcycles, right? And that's their rule. That's the way it is. Their house, their rule. I would also give the example in our Game B online community, private community. We have an explicit rule that says no anti-Semites, no racists, and it goes into considerable detail on what that means. And within a private community organized for a purpose.
I thought he said he would allow on the KKK.
But he's saying that for Twitter. Like, this guy just keeps going back to like his fucking glory days as a message board moderator in 1987. That doesn't fucking apply anymore. You fucking delusional old man.
And like, why isn't Twitter why is Twitter so different? I do agree that it is different. Like a Harley Davidson forum and Twitter have very different roles to fulfill, but they're not so different that the Harley Davidson forum can be like, hey, by the way, also no racism, and Twitter can't.
And the Harley Davidson forum on Reddit has to abide by the terms of service on Reddit or it gets removed.
Yeah, but if a Harley Davidson forum wanted to create their own forum website, they could implement whatever rules they want. And I agree with that. Like, as long as it's not illegal content, you should be able to put whatever you want on your website. So like Twitter should be able to enforce whatever rules on their website that they want. But we as users of Twitter should have at least some, we have as much say as like we could leave the platform if we don't like their rules. But like, I don't see anything wrong with Twitter saying like, hey, by the way, you can't just be like completely blatantly racist on our website.
Or you can't be recruiting people into QAnon here. If you're trying to spread this QAnon stuff, we're not going to let you do it here. They would be within their rights, although there might be some rules around religion where they get sued. They'd be within their rights to stop letting Scientology run ads too, I think. I think that might be a legal problem that with some freedom of religion stuff where maybe there's some protected class shit there that is applied to a religion. But the problem is that, first of all, Twitter's for everyone. So Twitter wants to attract what we're going to call normal people, right?
Yeah.
And if you're going to attract normal people, you can't have the Klan on there asking them to join the Klan because the normal people are going to be like, well, fuck this website.
Yeah. Like if the Klan is showing up trying to recruit you every week, you're probably going to leave.
Right. Or you're going to join the Klan. and that's bad. Right?
Yeah. Either one of those is bad for the website.
Right.
Or I guess one's more bad for you and one's more bad for the website. I don't know.
The difference is money. Like Roland in the chat said the difference is money because maybe the Harley Forum doesn't care about making money, but Twitter has investors that they have to show growth and advertising revenue and shit to. Otherwise, they're fucking stock tanks, and whoever owns all the stock, like they don't have any money anymore. God, this guy doesn't understand anything. It's man, I would love to talk to Jim Rutt. God, is he stupid. I would come out of that looking hella smart. And he'd also spend about half of the time complaining about my fucking decorum, which is what I'm here for.
Didn't he say that there was like stuff that Elon Musk needed to learn or something?
Yeah.
I was like, I'm pretty sure Elon Musk is doing fine. He doesn't need lessons from you.
Oh, I don't know. But I mean, he doesn't need lessons from Jim Rutt. That's for sure. But like, he also didn't say what those things were that he thought Elon Musk needed to learn, but that might be in his article, which I guess I could read it through AMP or something so I don't have to give Colette traffic.
No semicolons, in the Cormac.
Read it on archive.org.
Okay. But in the public squares where I object to these kinds of standards, and that's a completely different set of criteria.
Except the public square exists like outside your front door at the park or in front of the city hall. Or some shit.
Yeah, the public square is owned by the government. That's the difference.
Right. Twitter is a website owned by a corporation. It's not the public square. It gets a little bit muddy because people more and more are treating social media like the public square. But that just because they're treating it like that doesn't mean that's what it is.
Yeah.
And it's different, I guess, than other kinds of websites where you can maybe interact with people just because of the scale and the way in which things can become viral. There's like differences between different kinds of websites, but that doesn't make these places the public square. This motherfucker should go to the public square sometime and try to get any attention for any idea he's putting out there. It's hard.
Like if you're trying to recruit for the KKK out in like a park, there's nothing the government can do about that. And rightfully so. The government shouldn't be able to do anything about that.
Now the community might have a few. The community might have a few real ones who don't mind spending the night in the pokey to prevent you from recruiting for the KKK, but that's a different matter.
Yeah. Or someone could just come out and drown you out with a saxophone, and that's also perfectly valid. You can't say anything about them doing that if you're relying on the government to protect you to spread your hate. So that doesn't apply to Twitter. Twitter isn't run by the government. It's not public. And I fucking hate it when people compare these two things that are totally different.
There's ways in which you could argue that it's becoming more and more like the public square because that's where everyone has their conversations now, but that doesn't make it the public square. And there's definitely interesting discussions people could have about that, but this isn't one of them because Jim Rutt is part of this conversation. Oh, yikes. Oh, we're going to have to fucking put a fork in the podcast version of this. In fact, we're just gonna have to do it now. We're like over an hour and a half. We're gonna watch the rest of this in the post game now. HK, read the show out.
Thank you for joining us for the podcast and the live show. We do this show every Wednesday at 7 p.m. Pacific, and you can catch us most nights of the week. You can catch Dave, not me. I'm here, and every once in a while I'll be on the Sunday show. I'm going to try and do that more often. But check out our new show called How the Tech Are You? It's on YouTube and Odyssey and all your podcatchers. And stick around if you're here live for Red Light right after this song. And if you're listening on the podcast, try checking us out live sometime. This is Boomers by Periscope.